Okay, welcome to part 4 on our series of Judaism and Vegetarianism. So we've had some really eye-opening facts from Michael Kalati, and it's certainly turned my head around in terms of meat consumption, etc. So now we're going to move over and give the mic to Mike, and
thank you.
There we go.
Thank you, Rav Mashiach. This section, I'd like to talk about the Jewish teaching on resource conservation, or the law of Bal Tashchit, thou shalt not destroy. There's a prohibition against wasting or unnecessarily destroying anything of value, and it's based on the following Torah statements from Devarim, chapter 20, Pasuk 19-20. It says, and I quote, "When you shall besiege a city a long time, in making war against it to take it, you shall not destroy, lo tashchit, the trees thereof, by wielding an axe against them. For you may eat of them, but you shall not cut them down. For it is the tree of the field man, that it should be besieged by you. Only the trees of which know that they are not trees for food, them you may destroy and cut down, that you may build bulwarks against the city, that you make war with until it fall." Also in Kiddushin, Daf 32 Amud Aleph, our sages, the Talmud made a general prohibition against waste. It says, "Whoever breaks vessels or tears garments or destroys a building or clogs up a fountain or destroys food violates the prohibition of Bal Tashchis." Also in Baba Kama, Daf 91 Amud Beis, it mentions the seriousness with which the rabbis considered the violation of Bal Tashchis. It's illustrated by the following Talmudic Pesukim. It says, the sage Rav Chanina attributed the early death of his son to the fact that the boy had chopped down a fig tree. This was in Baba Kama, Daf 91 Amud Beis. In Barachot, Daf 52 on the base, it says Jews should be taught from a very young age that it is a sin to waste even small amounts of food. Also, the first law in Devarim, chapter 20, Pasuk 19-20, regard things as God's property and use them with a sense of responsibility for wise human purposes. Destroy nothing, waste nothing. This is Rav Shimon Raphael Hirsch in Choreb, chapter 56, section 401. Rav Hirsch also states that the Bal Tashchis is the first prohibition of creation, and that the destruction does not only mean making something unfit for its designated use, it also means trying to attain a certain aim by making use of more things and more valuable things when fewer and less valuable ones would suffice. If this aim is not really worth the means expended for its attainment. Now I'd like to mention, those are some of the sources that I think are quite forcible in this, the idea of Bal Tashchit. And these are some examples of contemporary wastefulness of animal-based diets, which is what this is all about. Firstly, the average person in the United States eats almost 5 times as much grain, mostly in the form of animal products, as does a person in a less developed country. It takes between 8 to 12 pounds of grain and soybeans to produce 1 pound of edible feedlot beef in the United States. Over 70% of the grain grown in the United States and over 40% of the grain produced worldwide is fed to animals destined for slaughter. As a roughly estimated 20 million people worldwide, primarily children, die of hunger, this is a big deal. Half of the Earth's landmass, that's a huge quantity, is grazed by livestock, and 64% of US cropland produces livestock feed, as compared to only 2% of US cropland producing fruits and vegetables. It's a huge emphasis laid on producing livestock feed, just the feed for the livestock. If you compare, a non-vegetarian diet requires around 3.5 acres per person, whereas a totally vegetarian diet or vegan diet requires only 1/5 of an acre. If we shift to vegetarian diets, it would free huge amounts of valuable land, which could be used to grow, different types of nutritious crops for people. That's a huge difference in 3.5 acres as opposed to 1/5 of an acre from a meat eater to a vegetarian. This is a very interesting statistic. This is describing the amount of water, which is a major resource that will only become more and more precious in years to come. Some people say that in the future, the wars will be fought not over oil production or conservation of oil, but they will be fought over the rights of water, clean water. Maybe in the future people will wage wars for water, not for oil, like people are doing today. This is an example of tremendous waste of water. Is in this following statistics: the standard diet of a person in the United States requires 4,200 gallons of water per day. This is encompassed by animals drinking water, irrigation of crops, processing, washing, cooking, etc. A person on a vegan diet requires as little as 300 gallons a day. So consider that. One day as a meat eater requires 4,200 gallons of water to supply that content. It's a huge amount of water. The production of only 1 pound of edible beef in California requires hundreds of gallons of water, as contrasted by only 25 gallons or less to produce an edible pound of potatoes, lettuce, tomatoes, or wheat. Livestock production in the United States accounts for over half of the water consumed for all purposes. That's crazy. That's a crazy statistics. In 1988, Newsweek reported that the water that goes into a 1,000-pound steer, like a cow, would float a naval destroyer. That's crazy. I'll say that again. Water that goes into a 1,000-pound cow would float a naval destroyer. So imagine, and that's one cow. Another statistic, a non-vegetarian diet also wastes large amounts of energy. In the US, an average of 10 calories of fuel energy are required for every calorie of food energy obtained. So 10 times the amount that you consume in calories must be used to produce that single calorie. 10 times. In many other countries, they gain 20 or more calories of food energy per calorie of fuel energy. To produce 1 pound of steak, which is approximately 500 calories of food energy, requires 20,000 calories of fossil fuels, most of which is expended for feed crops. It requires 78 calories of fossil fuel for each calorie of protein obtained from beef, but only 2 calories of fossil fuel to produce a calorie of protein from soybeans. The production of grains and beans requires only 2 to 5% as much fossil fuel as the production of beef. So this is a big deal. If energy is the big deal today, we're being extremely inefficient with our use of our available materials. And I think being careful about how we eat will solve a lot of the world's problems in terms of resource conservation and bal tashchis. We have a responsibility to feed the world, so to speak, and do it efficiently. And the way we're doing it now is not sustainable, absolutely not sustainable, especially with the polluted waters that are getting only more and more polluted.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael.